What is the longest 5 minutes you have ever experienced? I used to be a firefighter. My kid is still in there. He wasn't. He was hiding in the bushes next door, a bit frightened, but completely fine. I think that took a few years off my life. The time between a guy who was acting weird and kept approaching me while I was mowing my lawn, who then hid and was watching me from my neighbor's lawn, to when the cops arrested him. I went inside to call them via my back door. Front was locked, and he followed me and started knocking and scratching against it. I went from hiding on the ground against my back door so he couldn't see me to locked in my upstairs bathroom with a bat. By the end of it all, 5 minutes seems like forever when you're terrified. I'm a paramedic. When the patient isn't doing so hot, I can tell you 5 minutes on the way to the hospital lasts a long ass time. Watching adult scenes with parents. I'm an adult now and it still makes me uncomfortable. 6 months ago, anesthesia ended too soon while the surgeon was still stitching up my knee after realigning my patella. There were still 3 stitches to go. I still can't decide what was the worst pain, the tourniquet on the top of my thigh or the stitches. Sang a song in front of like 300 people without a monitor so I couldn't hear, but I just knew I was totally off key. I have a less harrowing answer as well. The last 5 minutes of an ultrasound on your abdomen, when forced to do so with a full bladder. Especially when I got my appointment wrong and showed up an hour early. I have, in all my 30+ years, never had to pee so badly. Well, in 5th grade while the principal was listing off the profanities, I searched on Google Earth. Waiting at the DMV line that led to the true DMV line. Waiting for that pregnancy test result, regardless of how you want the result to sway. Being young and waiting for my mum to pick me up from somewhere and she was late. Loading screens in games back when I had a laptop. A presentation about grass. I don't know why we had to watch it, or why they chose to do it. My son was silent when he was born. The doctor gave me a serious look, handed me the scissors to cut the umbilical cord, and then rushed my son to a table on the other side of the room. I moved to the head of the bed to tell my wife what a great job she did. I honestly have no idea how long it took to hear him cry, but those minutes were the longest year of my life. He turned 20 last month. I did a bungee jump off the Vesurska Dam in Ticino, Switzerland. Link. It's famous for being in the opening scene of GoldenEye. The jump itself was amazing, but as I bounced up and down after the initial jump, my body rotated and the bungee cord kind of corkscrewed around my legs a couple of times. When the vertical motion finally stopped, I was hanging over a huge drop with a rocky riverbed below, and the cord wrapped right around my legs, giving the impression that it was all that was holding me up. The operators were shouting at me to remove my ankle from the twisted cord so that they could pull me back up. My rational mind knew that I was securely fastened at the hip, but the tension of the cord on my ankle made it feel like I depended on it and that I would fall to my death the second I unwrapped it. I was physically unable to unwrap my ankle for a full 5 minutes while the guys shouted down from the top of the dam. Upside down, blood rushing to my head the whole time. Eventually I found the courage to unwrap my ankle and everything was fine. But man, that was the longest, most horrible 5 minutes. Upside down and being asked to go against every instinct of survival. The last 5 minutes on a treadmill. When I was a kid, my mom told me to wait online at the supermarket, and then she went to go get some more things. The person who was at the cashier had just paid and the lady in front of me began unloading her, not heavily packed, shopping cart. She had almost finished loading and was about ready to pay when my mother finally reappeared. Those were simultaneously the longest and the shortest and most terrifying 5 minutes of my life. Terrified. I had been dropped off on the remote coast off the Portland Canal in northern BC, Canada. No dock, no roads out. Spent the day there, a woman working alone. When the boat came back for me later in the afternoon, the tide had gone out. It had turned cold and the wind was up. The shore rocks were covered in wet seaweed and the boat was being buffeted in and out away from the rocks. The only way to get off was to wait for the boat to start getting closer, run down the slippery slope and have one of the guys on the boat catch me before I slid and fell into the water between the boat and the shore. The minutes were spent getting the nerve up to do it. I finally found myself doing it, and the guy caught me. The crew high-fived, but it took me a while to stop shaking. I was 60 at the time. I was forced to listen to the Kids Bop cover of Old Town Road. Mayo watching my crush walk away after I told her how I felt. Then she came back about 5 minutes later and just quietly told me she didn't want to speak with me anymore. Loudly crying face. All the times my mum would leave me in the car to dash into a store quickly, I would get more and more worried she got hit by a car on the way back. I cried a few times lol. Wanting to puke but instead taking an anti-vomit pill which lasted 1 day. OFC, my stomach was in pain all day and I couldn't eat or drink anything. There were many long 5 minutes. Ridiculously long. I was working graveyards at the time, so sleep was whenever I could fall asleep. One morning I got home at about 8:30 am and was asleep before 10. An hour or so later, the girl I was dating called to ask to hang out, and I told her I was trying to sleep and maybe around 3 or 4 I'd be up. After this conversation I couldn't fall back asleep right away, so I figured I'd check out some StarCraft matches, but then suddenly my girlfriend shows up to my house, and she was pissed. She said I was lying about trying to sleep and then shut herself in my room. I told her what had happened and also that I thought she was making too big of a deal out of this, and that she needed to leave. She refused to leave and I asked my mother to help. She sat there in my room on the verge of tears, silent, for a long time. It tore my heart, but I felt like I wasn't being taken seriously either. Eventually she did leave, but a few weeks later we broke up due to other circumstances. Being stoned, waiting for the train. The display showed arrival in 5 minutes. Half an hour later it was 4 minutes. I was in the middle of a root canal when my dentist touched the nerve with the drill bit. I had never experienced that level of pain before. He immediately stopped what he was doing, injected more Novocaine directly into the nerve. But the 5 minutes after that, waiting for the pain to go away and trying to calm down, felt like a million years. Last 5 minutes of a test. When you're done with the test and have to wait till the end, it feels like 5 hours. When I checked out of a hotel in Tokyo once, the receptionist tried charging the full amount to my card, but it kept getting denied time after time. I didn't have another card on me, so the incredibly kind receptionist charged my card repeatedly with decreasing amounts until I was left with an open balance of merely 1,032 Japanese yen. If I hadn't left a variety of small coins in my room, which I didn't want to take back with me and which I also didn't spend because I hate paying with them, I would have had a huge problem, as I had no other money on me in any form. Border control once decided to pretend that they wouldn't let me into the country because my passport was too battered. They made me sit outside the Lille police station just before passport control at Schiphol airport and said they'd be sending me home. My friends had all been let through. I could see them on the other side of the gates pissing themselves. Eventually the guards let me through and just said they had to teach me a lesson to make sure I'd get a new passport. When I looked back after getting through, they were all cracking up and high-fiving each other. Assholes. That was the longest 5 minutes of my life. I had to get injections of a medication directly into my eye. Wide awake, with numbing drops and nothing to hold my eye in place. After prep, about 8 different eye drops and a numbing gel. The doctor would come in and grab a needle for the injection. He would have me look up before sticking the needle into my eye and injection a tiny amount of fluid, but this fluid would blind that eye for 5 minutes, create a ton of pressure, introduce small black bubbles into my vision, and gradually come back by revealing portions of my vision like a jigsaw puzzle. The whole process takes about 5 minutes, with the vision recovery taking maybe another 5. It feels like a never-ending nightmare despite the complete absence of any pain. Sitting in that room waiting to meet our newly adopted daughter for the first time. Last night I sneezed while drinking whiskey. You know that thing when milk comes out your nose? Yay. That. But whiskey. I can only describe it as Satan's neti pot. It was the worst experience of my life. When I was with my ex, it was the 5 minutes it took to walk from the bus stop to her house. It was the longest because I couldn't wait to see her.